Most zombies in Magic are just reanimated husks, soulless, shambling corpses brought back by necromancy with no lingering trace of who they were. But the truly skilled necromancers can go further, anchoring a spirit back into its former body to create a more cunning, self-aware kind of undead. For example, on the gleaming, artificially refined shard of Esper, some beings achieve undeath by replacing their bodies with Ethereum, becoming eerie constructs known as Aetherliches. These creatures preserve their souls within arcane phylacteries called immortal coils, permanently binding mind to metal. By contrast, Amonkhet is soaked so thoroughly in death magic that nothing stays dead for long. This is the curse of wandering, a plane-wide affliction that brings every corpse back to life, at least until it decays to bone. These risen are called the accursed, and unless they're mummified through sacred rites, they eventually turn feral. But through cartouches and ceremonial embalming, the dead can be transformed into obedient servants, used for labor and combat. Two of Ravnica's guilds routinely employ zombies in their ranks as well. The Golgari approach undeath like composting, pragmatic, natural, and strangely reverent. Their necromancy is ritualistic, raising the dead either as blank slate laborers or as sentient revenants who retain their skills and identities. Their own guild masters, Svogthir and Gerard, are prime examples of sapient zombies. Many of these undead are fused with moss, mushrooms, or crawling insects. Rakdos zombies are another story entirely. Raised for violence and shock value, these corpses are modified with brutal enhancements. Metal jaws, spiked limbs, and torture devices fused into their bodies. On Dominaria, the influence of the Cabal meant zombies were everywhere. No species was spared. As the Mirari twisted the region's mana, the undead started mutating, sprouting extra limbs or grotesque new heads. Zombies are even more common in the gothic horror world of Innistrad. Collectively known as the Unhallowed, Innistrad's zombies fall into two main types. First are the ghouls, traditional black-aligned zombies raised by necromancers or ghoul callers. They operate like a spreading plague, biting, devouring, and turning the living into more of their kind. In gameplay, ghouls tend to be cost-efficient but flawed. Strong stats for the mana, but often burdened with drawbacks like entering tapped or being unable to block. That said, they are notoriously hard to keep dead, returning again and again through mechanics like undying or effects like the one found on Gravecrawler. The second type is Stranger. These are the Scabs, stitched horrors born from the misguided ambitions of deranged scientists. Scabs are cobbled together from corpses and reinforced with metal plating. Mechanically, Scabs often require an upfront cost, like exiling creature cards from your graveyard, representing the raw material used to stitch these Frankenstein's monsters together. The reference to Mary Shelley's novel is made even more explicit in the card Rooftop Storm. On Kaldheim, zombies take the form of the Draugr, undead Vikings animated by greed and vengeance. They originate from Karfell, a once great kingdom. Long ago, King Nafi sold out his people, inviting the god of death to transform Karfell's noble caste and their subjects into walking corpses. These Draugr still cling to their old social order, jealously guarding ancient vaults filled with treasure and relics. The undead on Theros are souls who have escaped the underworld ruled by Erebos. But freedom comes at a steep cost. To flee death's domain, one must forfeit memory and identity. The returned wander through existence cut off from their former selves. They can think and feel, but lack the continuity that gives life meaning. No memories, no long-term attachments. Just shadows of who they were, stumbling through endless cycles of loneliness and numbness. True relationships are impossible. Some of these zombies become drifters, storytellers, or merchants, but others fall under the control of darker forces, either enslaved by cruel masters or ruled by their own emptier instincts. Each wears a golden mask, simulating a self without truly providing one. All of these settings draw on the much older history of zombies in folklore and media. The idea originated in Haitian folklore, where zombies weren't monsters but victims. Reanimated by sorcerers, these pitiful undead were stripped of free will and condemned to eternal labor. American horror movies in the 1930s started riffing on this concept, but it was George Romero's 1968 film Night of the Living Dead that crystallized the template. Romero's undead weren't slaves and they weren't magical. They were simply dead people, risen, hungry, relentless. These zombies didn't think or speak, they didn't follow orders, they bit, tore, and infected. If you died, you rose too, and turned on your friends. Romero's later movie Dawn of the Dead relocated the setting to a shopping mall, turning zombies into a critique of consumerism. Over the decades, the zombie continued to evolve. While early undead had roots in folklore and dark magic, newer iterations leaned harder into science fiction. I Am Legend and Night of the Living Dead had already started pulling zombies away from Haitian mysticism, though neither gave a clear scientific rationale. Resident Evil and 28 Days Later, however, finished the job, explaining their monsters through viral outbreaks, bioengineering, parasitic infection, and weaponized science. This shift toward plausible-sounding science, however flimsy or speculative, became the go-to explanation for zombie plagues in almost everything that followed. Biological warfare, experimental drugs, rogue labs. Suddenly, zombies weren't magical, they were man-made. The fast zombie, a more recent development, was born from video games. Resident Evil introduced sprinting zombie dogs in 1996, and later that year, House of the Dead unleashed running, leaping, swimming human zombies. These weren't your shuffling Romero corpses. They charged, they lunged, they attacked like predators. Another key part of zombie horror is the way the dead invert and mock the living. Seeing beloved characters reduced to ghouls is always a jarring sight. This trope plays out across magic too. The dwarven barbarian Belthor becomes Belthor the Defiled. The draconic champion Rorik's Bladewing becomes Bladewing the Risen. The elf Glissa Sunseeker takes Phyrexian form as Glissa the Traitor. Phyrexian Crusader is a rotting metallic inversion of Mirren Crusader. Micaeus the Lunarch is warped into Micaeus the Unhallowed. Oketra the True is reanimated as God Eternal Oketra. The noble Knight of the Reliquary becomes the ghastly Wight of the Reliquary. And Champion of the Parish returns as its grim mechanical opposite, Champion of the Perished. Nowadays, the defining features of zombies are usually their slowness, their appetite for brains, their strength in numbers, and the seeming contradiction that they are mindless and yet can be defeated by having their brains destroyed. In their fantastic book, Zombies in Western Culture, authors John Vervaeke, Christopher Mastro Pietro, and Philip Meskovic argue that the zombie is not merely a horror antagonist, but a multi-layered cultural metaphor. According to them, it reflects a modern crisis of meaning, worldview, and identity. Specifically, they say that zombies symbolize the collapse of the traditional frameworks that once gave coherence to human life. The zombie itself is a composite of symbolic features, including Mindlessness, meaning no language, no inner life, and no self-awareness. Homelessness, as in no lair, no rest, no belonging. Insatiable appetite. The zombie consumes endlessly, but it is never nourished. Ugliness, the horror of being inhuman in human form. Contagion, touch is dangerous, intimacy is impossible. Heedlessness, the zombie cannot protect itself or adapt. And amorality, the zombie is not evil, just empty. Rather than pointing to one specific issue like disease, the zombie is a constellation of symptoms indicating a broader existential rupture. In other words, the Walking Dead have become a symbolic every monster, representing everything from environmental collapse to consumerism, loneliness, and moral decay. Crucially, the zombie is not an external threat. It is us, or at least what we fear we are becoming. For these authors, the zombie metaphor reflects a deeper crisis, the disintegration of a shared worldview, particularly in the West, and particularly after the erosion of the Christian cultural canopy that once unified values and behaviors. Without shared religious or civic narratives, society has lost its frameworks for understanding self and others. This breakdown fosters alienation, even among neighbors. The zombie apocalypse marks the death of meaningful stories. Unlike monsters like aliens or vampires, zombies offer no motive, no villainy, and no possibility of salvation. Interestingly, characters in zombie media rarely use the term zombie. They say walkers or the infected, etc., as if the concept itself is unspeakable or culturally disavowed. This linguistic avoidance reflects a deeper refusal to confront the symbol. Naming the zombie invites despair, because there's no solution or redemption tied to it. Indeed, zombie stories typically refuse narrative resolution. They start with hope, community, and survival plans, but end in collapse and drift. There is no transformation, no climax, and no redemption, only repetition and defeat. This reflects a broader cultural failure of meta-narratives, the big stories that once gave us purpose or ethical frameworks. In that sense, the zombie is the icon of a culture that no longer knows what it means to be human. The world no longer feels coherent, intimate, soulful, or revelatory. The zombie genre reflects this cultural homelessness, as both zombies and survivors drift without stability or symbolic anchoring. Vervaeke and his co-authors also make the case that the zombie is a perversion of Christian resurrection. The body rises, but the soul is absent. The apocalypse comes, but no truth is revealed. More broadly, the zombie genre enacts our fear that there is no longer any beyond. No sacred, no moral horizon, only endless survival and degradation. In the end, the zombie image points to a civilization unmoored from shared narratives, spiritual depth, and moral clarity. These undead are symbols of a world where the human has been hollowed out from within, where touch, language, and thought no longer bind us. They are the walking dead, and increasingly, so are we. Until next time, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider joining my Patreon.